Welcome to the Vitamin Professor podcast, brought to you by VRM Media, publisher of vitamin retailer and nutrition industry executive magazines, in partnership with Nutraland USA. I'm your host, Gene Bruno, Professor Emeritus of Nutraceutical Science and Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA. The purpose of this podcast is to help educate the dietary supplement industry about the science of nutraceuticals and other relevant topics. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, I want to welcome back today a guest that we've had before. This is Dr. Annie George, but let me give you a little information about her. For over 20 years, she's had experience in research. She joined Biotropics Malaysia Berhad in 2007, and she manages the research and development of herbal ingredients and nutraceuticals. She's managed 15 clinical trials on herbal products for efficacy and safety in the indication of men and women's health, glucose management, cognition, weight loss, and immune health. She also manages toxicology, safety, and preclinical proof of concept studies. Dr. Annie is currently the co-inventor for 16 patents filed on natural products, the latest being Uricoma longifolia, or Tongkat Ali, for immune health and antiviral properties, and Polygonum minus, Kesum, for memory. Prior to Biotropics, Annie also worked on natural products as antibiotics in a Japanese company, Nomura Genetic Solutions. Prior to this, she worked on tissue cultures of near-extinct plants, such as the pitcher plant or the monkey plant, and food crops. Dr. Annie has published several publications in peer-reviewed journals with a focus on herbal ingredients as health solutions, and often communicates research at conferences and media. Today, Dr. Annie is back, and she's going to talk to us about Kesum. Welcome, Dr. Annie.
Hi, Gene. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So, first of all, am I pronouncing that right? Is that Kesum?
It's
Yeah,
we call it Kesum.
Say that again?
Kesum.
Kesum.
Yeah.
Okay, Kesum.
Okay.
Got it. All right, thanks, Dr. Annie. Okay, so just for the benefit of our listeners, could you explain the relationship between Biotropics Malaysia Berhad and HP Ingredients?
So HP Ingredients are our exclusive distributor for our ingredients in the Northern American region. So we've been working with them for the past almost 20 years already.
Okay, so the Kesum is something that if there were people in brand owners and contract manufacturers in the USA who was interested in this material, they could contact HP Ingredients for that.
Sure, yes, that's
okay.
right.
Very good. So what is Kesum? Explain that. Let's start there.
Okay, sure. So Kesum is actually a standardized water extract from the plant called Kesum in Malaysia, and also it's known as smartweed in the US. So it is a standardized extract to which it is standardized to quercetin 3-glucuronides, and it contains a lot of flavonoids, and it's also high in antioxidant. So this standardized extract, we've done several clinical studies, and now we've been able to show that it is actually good for improvement of memory, and also anti-inflammatory properties, and also immunomodulatory properties. So that in a nutshell is what Kesum is.
Very good, and that giving the memory properties, that makes sense that it's or cognitive properties that it's been called smartweed too.
Exactly.
Some of the compounds you mentioned, are those compounds just marker compounds, or are they some of the active compounds that help give Kesum its properties?
At the moment, we use it as a marker compound, but we have noticed that the quercetin 3 glucuronide, in a separate study, it has been shown to reduce the beta amyloids, which is associated with the plaques, which again is present in subjects with Alzheimer's. So this is a separate study, and it just so happened that that is the major compound in the Biokesum.
Okay, so you explained a little bit about some of the areas of research and some of the general benefits of Biokesum. So let's talk about some of the individual benefits. Let's start with, what is the effect of Biokesum on cognitive function? Could you elaborate a little bit?
Okay, when it comes to cognitive function, we've seen that there are several mechanisms of action in which it can actually improve memory and also cognition. For one, it's able to increase the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that is actually a protein which actually supports the growth of neurons, and brain cells particularly, supports and also maintains the health of neurons. We've also seen that it's able to inhibit acetylcholinesterase, and as a result, you have more acetylcholines in your neurons, which is able to fire between neurons, carrying out the communication between the neuron cells in the brain. Apart from that, it's also able to improve the neurostimulation in the brain, especially in the prefrontal cortex. And we've seen this in clinical studies where the subjects, they're put through an fMRI, and we see that the frontal portion of the brain is actually activated. So we know that is the area that actually, controls your behavior, your learning, your working memory, and many different functions within cognition. So it is also able to reduce inflammation, and what we've seen is it's actually able to reduce the biomarker for oxidative stress, which is the aldehyde and also the iNOS. And we know that these are basically the biomarkers for oxidative stress. So we know that Biokesum is rich in antioxidants, and so it has a protective effect on the cells in the body.
Okay, and so that's really interesting, and I just want to back up for a moment for our listeners so they understand that one of the functions here of inhibiting acetylcholinesterase, the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, means that you have more acetylcholine, and the significance of that is that that's a neurotransmitter, as you mentioned, that's involved in communication, but also memory functions in general. And so if you have more of that, you're going to have potentially better memory function. So that's a powerful mechanism, and that's very cool. And then the inflammation that you talked about, of course, anytime that who isn't going to benefit by helping to reduce inflammation, but that can also have a beneficial effect even on cognitive function itself. So those are some pretty cool things. So do you see benefits beyond the benefits on reducing inflammation? Do you see benefits on that beyond just the relationship to cognitive function, or do you think there's other areas of human health that could benefit by that reduction in inflammation?
We actually, because we saw that it actually can reduce inflammation, we did an animal study looking at the effect of, the anti-inflammatory effect of Biokesum on pore edema. So really looking at swelling. Yeah. So what we did was we did two of these preclinical studies. What we did was we induced pore edema using carrageenan, and we looked at whether the supplementation of Biokesum is able to reduce the swelling. And we saw that within that 4 hours, the swelling was able to reduce, and this was done in comparison with diclofenac. And in another study, we went a little bit more deeper, where we actually induced the inflammation in the joint, because the knee of the rat, and where and this is how we actually induce sort of an osteoarthritis model, and we saw that it was able to reduce swelling. It was able to also reduce the cytokines TNF alpha and also IL-6. And so we know these are all pro-inflammatory markers, right? And also
Yeah.
it was able to reduce what we call the COM protein. I've got to cartilage oligomeric matrix protein, and usually this is increased in in a subject that has osteoarthritis because of the cartilage degradation. But with the supplementation of Biokesum, we saw that this actually reduced, and when you compare this with the control, which we did not have any support at all, it is a reduction by 15%. So that is pretty impressive
Wow.
in such an osteoarthritis model.
Yeah, it sounds like it has really great potential for osteoarthritis and the
Exactly.
effects that it's having. I was also interested to hear that it's reducing edema. One of the thoughts that crosses my mind is, in addition to just that, general benefit in relationship to joint swelling and so forth, people have other issues with edema. Like, one of the things that happens is, a lot of times, people have edema, or, for those of our listeners who don't know what that is, that's a water retention in specific
Yes.
areas.
Yes.
And you see people often have edema, like in their ankles and those areas. And there are some nutraceuticals on the market that deal with that to some extent. But that's really, really interesting, which gives it, to my mind, at least potentially, that might have value for people who are concerned with, some of the leg swelling and edema and that sort of thing, that this might have potential for that. So that's very cool, in addition to its beneficial effects on, joint inflammation and potentially for osteoarthritis. That's awesome. It's an interesting range so far, and I know we're not even done yet. That's an interesting range of benefits for this
Exactly.
one thing. Typically, when you look at a nutraceutical that has sort of multiple areas of benefits, you think of maybe an adaptogen or something. But this isn't specifically an adaptogen, right? This is just a really cool herb that has multiple benefits. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, yeah. It's not exactly adaptogen, but we've seen multiple benefits in this. One is in cognition, the other one is in inflammation. And the next step, actually, we would really like to do a clinical study in looking at, joint health, and
Yeah.
also, in edema, because I think that will be really, really interesting, because we've had testimonials from people who have taken it. Of course, they've taken it for improvement of memory, but they've noticed other things improve as well. They said, I had pain in my back, but that has reduced since I took Biokesum. So we've been hearing this, and we're really excited to get a clinical study done on this as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, given it's the reduction in the different inflammatory markers, there's so many potential areas that it could address. That's very cool. Now, how about skin? What is the effect of Biokesum on skin?
So the initial study that we did was to look at whether it had any effect on collagenase, whether has any anti-collagenase effect. And we did this on MMP1, which is actually the matrix metalloproteinase 1, which is also known as the collagenase. And it had it had an inhibition of this enzyme. So then we went on further to actually do a small clinical study to look at whether, just a topical application of Biokesum in a cream is able to reduce wrinkle. Yeah. And then, so we noticed that, we actually looked at the crow's feet around the eyes, and we noticed that the number of lines reduced, and also the length of the lines reduced over a period of 1 month, and it was like 12% more than what you would actually see in the placebo. So that was also a significant result, and something that has a potential of it being used as a topical as well.
That's amazing. For the benefit of our listeners, collagenase enzyme breaks down collagen, which is not necessarily desirable because, as we age, we make less collagen, and you see more wrinkles and more thin skin, and collagen plays so many roles in our body, not just skin, but other areas. But to be able to help reduce that breakdown, that's huge. That's an amazing application. And I see applications for that when I put on my formulator hat. I think, okay, so people are using collagen products, and those are beneficial in helping to stimulate collagen production. But how great would it be to combine it with a Biokesum and at the same time reduce collagen breakdown while helping to stimulate new collagen production. That would be a great combination, and I don't think anybody's doing that yet. So, and then the idea of being able to use it on skin like that, topically, that's phenomenal. Because that's really cool. That could be a whole new personal care area of application. That's pretty
And
awesome.
I think it also opens an opportunity of whether you want to put it topically or whether this benefit can be seen if you actually ingest it. So that is also another area that we can actually look at, because I'm sure that there'd be some benefits in that area as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds really, really interesting. Now, so far we've talked about cognitive function, we've talked about inflammation, we've talked about skin, but I understand that there's also some effect of Biokesum on stress and mood. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So what we've seen in our 3 clinical studies that we did on cognition, for all of these studies, we also included a profile of mood scores, which is basically a set of questionnaires to look at the person's level of stress. And we found that in all of these 3 clinical studies, we saw significant reduction in anger, confusion, tension, basically the total mood scores. So we thought, wow, has an additional benefit. Not only can it improve memory, different levels of cognition, but it can also improve mood as well. So it has a calming effect.
Wow, that's fascinating. And again, I go back to, it keeps reminding me of an adaptogen, stress, mood, all these different things that it does. So for not being an adaptogen, it seems to work remarkably similar in terms of all the multiple benefits. So that's pretty cool. There's so many applications for this material. Now this makes me wonder, when I think about cognition, when I think about stress and mood, I wonder, would you say that there are any potential benefits on Biokesum for mental health?
Yeah, I would think so, because the thing is, so while we discovered, the improvement of mood, we have also seen in animal studies where, the model that was used was vascular dementia. The other model was the depressed mood model. This is all in animals. And the other one was on stress. And we've seen that in the different animal studies, not only there was improvement in the levels of, reducing the levels of anxiety, reducing the levels of stress in these animals. We've seen that the serotonin was improved, serotonin levels. We also noticed that GABA improved, and we also noticed that the corticosterone levels reduced. So now we understand the mechanism of action that potentially gave that calming effect in the clinical studies. So we have seen this improvement in the animals, and we believe this is how they would actually improve, the mental moods, the moods in subjects as well.
That's very, very interesting. I think about all these different activities and potential applications for this material, and it's actually quite exciting. I wonder about, I remember I had actually read a study in a journal on this on the Polygonum-minus, this material, and it indicated that it had some antibacterial activity as well as antioxidant. Have you seen that as well?
Yes, I've read some of the journals done by other researchers where they actually saw some antibacterial properties as well. So in fact, there have been some product development by other researchers where they actually looking at the possibility of using Kesum, the plant itself, Kesum wraps as a packaging material because it has antibacterial or antimicrobial properties. So that is like a different set of product development that we've seen researchers actually pursuing.
So that's cool, and it makes me think that there's even some potential here for, a lot of times when when you're taking a nutraceutical and you're putting it in a product, some of the nutraceutical materials oxidize fairly quickly, and sometimes they combine it together with other nutraceuticals to help reduce the oxidation. And it seems that like maybe Biokesum could even be used to help reduce that kind of oxidation or undesirable antibacterial activity when combined with others. So it may have an ancillary application as well as its major one. So if you, let me ask you, if you were to say, what, in your opinion, what do you think are sort of the two strongest areas of application for Biokesum? If you were going to say, if they said, Dr. Annie, I want you to create two formulas that's going to go to market and have the greatest potential for success with regard to the health application, what are the two areas you would focus on? I think I know the answer, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think it would be in brain health, and also in the joint health as well, because we've seen significant improvement in these two areas, and we have animal studies, we also have clinical studies where we've seen this improvement. And with regards to brain health, actually we looked at three different types of population. The first population were basically adults beyond 35 ages and above. We also looked at moderately stressed women, and finally we actually looked at a population that had mild cognitive impairment. So these are subjects which have some issues with memory but not coming to the levels of dementia. And in this population itself, they're much older, they have MCI. This is a population that we saw the improvement in BDNF, where we saw this neurostimulation, and significant improvement in memory. So if we can actually, improve the brain health of a population which is so much older, which actually have a lot of their biochemistry already quite set in its way, then imagine what it can do for executives, those 35 and above or 30 and above. Imagine what it can do to improve the quality of life of such people as well.
So when you mentioned some mild cognitive impairment, I start thinking about people, as we age, you have some age-related memory impairment that takes place, which again isn't a dementia per se, but it is just that kind of thing where people say, where did I set my keys? Where did I put this? Where, and although that can happen to people of any age, it's much more prevalent in people as they age. So it sounds like, if I'm not misunderstanding what you're saying, that this could have application not just for people who have some dementia, but just regular memory impairment that takes place as just a natural part of aging, that it could have some real specific benefits in that area. Would that be a correct statement?
Yeah, so one is in the subjects which is aging, but the other population also those who are stressed, and especially those who are working. You got a family to come back to, and you also have the job stress, and with stress comes sometimes memory issues, because you already have a lot of clutter in your mind. You're not thinking straight. You don't have enough clarity. So it is also in such people itself that we can actually see such an improvement if you're actually using Biokesum.
That makes sense. I mean, there's other nutraceuticals that I've seen where, when a person is stressed out, their cognitive function isn't as good. They can't think as clearly.
Exactly.
And if you're able to address that, that's very cool. So really, this could have more than one sort of mechanism by which it's improving cognitive function. It's general improvements in cognitive function, brain-derived neurotropic factor and so forth, but then also just that general stress issue that's happening. So it sounds like this makes it an even more interesting material because it's hitting the problem from more than one angle, and I like that. Okay, so the other area besides brain health, what would be your other area of focus? Would that be inflammation?
Yeah, the other area would be inflammation, because it is really rich in antioxidants, rich in flavonoids and quercetin. So we believe that it can also improve in this area, especially when we saw the improvement in the joint health in the animal study that we did. And this animal study was really fascinating because it was an osteoarthritis model, and we saw the improvement in the cartilage because we had x-rays done to the joint. We also had histopath done, and we could actually see the improvement right up at the joint itself. So this will be a huge area, I believe, where we can actually have Kesum addressed the joint health as well.
Wow. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. Now, one of the areas that I hadn't talked to you about is, and you hadn't mentioned, but I'm just going to mention it because, again, as I was doing my due diligence and just doing a little bit of reading, I saw another potentially interesting area. I'm not sure if this is something you've seen, but there was a study where they looked at the anti-obesity potential of this plant.
Yes.
They were looking at it from a couple of angles, including inhibition of pancreatic lipase, and they're seeing some improvements. This is a rat study, and
Yes.
they had a reduction in fasting glucose levels, and so they were thinking that maybe it might have some potential for improvements in this area. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've also seen this paper that you mentioned. I've seen that there has been some studies looking at the anti-hyperglycemic effect. So this is pretty new. We have not really gone, deeper in this area, but I think that this is a potential area as well. And we're open to unravel more from the Kesum extract.
Yeah, well, as though it didn't already have enough benefits, this could potentially be a new one. And you're right, it's pretty new. I mean, the paper was in March of this year, so it hasn't been around very long. And as far as I know, it's the first study of its kind.
Yes, it's a new area.
And so, so that would be pretty cool if it actually had that benefit. Somebody could use this product and experience multiple benefits. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that although it has application for people of many different age groups, I think about the age group of, let's say, Gen X and baby boomers, especially baby boomers, but Gen X and baby boomers that have both problems with joint pain and have problems with cognitive health in terms of age-related memory impairment and all of that kind of stuff, having both of these things. And this is a material, the Kesum is a material that, because it can address both of those, that seems like an ideal approach. If somebody's formulating for that age group, they can, let's say they're doing formulating a product for cognitive function, because of the fact that it has the anti-inflammatory benefits, they could also say, and this has some benefits for healthy joints, or vice versa. They're doing a joint health product. It also has benefits for cognitive health. They could mention that as a secondary benefit in either case, which to my mind, at least based on marketing trends I've seen, people like to hear that there's an additional benefit above and beyond what they're taking that product for.
Because then they don't have to take too many products, right? You just have to pop in a limited amount of products and then have the benefit that you want.
Well, exactly. And also, it's just the idea of a value-added proposition. Somebody is taking it and, oh yes, I'm taking it for this, but I'm going to get this other benefit too. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's cool.
So you've mentioned a number of things about the Kesum, and I just wanted to ask, is there anything that you haven't mentioned yet that you'd like to mention?
I did not really go in detail on the cognitive improvement.
Oh, please. Yes, let's hear a little bit more about that.
Let's go through a little bit on the clinical studies that we actually did and what
please
actually
go through
improved. Yeah, okay. Just have a look at it. Okay, so the first study was the very first study that we did, and we did this back in 2011 in the US, where we looked at Biokesum in combination with other herbs as well, where Biokesum was, the larger amount. And we looked at the battery of tests, and we had subjects who were in the study, where it was a crossover study, placebo-controlled, randomized, and they had reduced sleep, and they had also no coffee in the last 24 hours, and they were given Biokesum and put through a battery of tests, computerized battery of tests called the CNSVS. And in that 4 hours itself, we saw the improvement in reaction time and also in working memory. So that was the very first study that we did, And we were so encouraged by that improvement, and that's when we did the second study focusing only on Biokesum. And we targeted teachers who were stressed, who were between the ages of 35 and 59. And what we saw was that the subjects had improved cognition in terms of cognitive flexibility, in terms of executive function, processing speed of the information, and also IQ performance, which is actually measured using the Wechsler abbreviated intelligence score, where it actually looks at verbal, non-verbal, your level of comprehension and reasoning, and all these areas improved in the stress teachers. So you can imagine, right, the teachers have a class of 40 students, and these are not the only 40 students that they deal with, right? They also have to deal with the other classes, so they're probably dealing with 160 students per day. And so imagine their levels of, stress having to deal with these kids. And so even when they were asked to do the profile of mood scores, there was significant reduction in anger. So so we know that, okay, this works for stress subjects, normal stress subjects. And that's when we thought, okay, we didn't look at biomarkers, we just had computerized battery of tests, we had profile of mood scores, but what does it do biochemistry wise? So that's when we went for the mild cognitive impairment subjects, and that's where we saw that, okay, the BDNF goes up. There's a neurostimulation when we did the fMRI. We also noticed that they had their visual memory improve significantly. They also had their mood improve as well significantly. They had less tension, less anger, less confusion. And I think having less confusion at an older age is really helpful because it helps one be more independent and be more decisive. Especially because these subjects were 65, in median about 65, and so that was really helpful to actually see the effect and the impact in these subjects.
A couple of things jump out at me from your description, and one is that the improvement in reaction time. That improvement in reaction time, there's a lot of cognitive enhancing nutraceuticals on the market. But from what I've seen, there aren't as many that really improve reaction time, as much as there are ones that claim to improve memory and what have you. And the fact that there's improvements in reaction time, that has a lot of interesting applications. One that occurs to me, kind of a newer area of cognitive benefit, is you have what are called the gamers, those who are playing video games online and all of this. And they're always looking for an edge, something that can improve. And of course, when they're doing that, if they can improve their reaction time, that can actually help them in what they're trying to achieve. And it makes me think that there's potential area of benefit there. Do you think that might be a potential area?
Yeah, we actually are thinking about that population as well, and we want to actually formulate something that can actually be something that the e-gamers like. So we're trying to understand what do they typically take, so that we can incorporate Biokesum in as well, so that can be something that I think that will will really boost their game, because it's not only something that increases your reaction time, it also keeps you calm, because I think you also need to be calm to be
You're
able to
right. You
sit
can
through the
do. You
game.
can absolutely. You can function better if you don't have
Yeah,
that level of that high tension. Um,
yeah.
so another area that occurred to me, and it wasn't until you mentioned it that I realized a few years ago I read a study on polygonal minus this, and there's an expression that's here. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Meaning, as you're
Yeah,
older, you're not going to change your ways or whatever. But the study that jumped out at me that I remember is this was a study done, and they did it on middle-aged women. They didn't do it on older. They didn't do it on younger people. They did it on middle-aged women, and they were taking the polygonal minus material, and they actually had an improvement in IQ. You mentioned IQ,
yes,
and and as they measured it, they looked at it was about over a 6-week period, about a
yes,
10-point improvement.
exactly,
That
yes,
was that is pretty amazing. I mean, and
exactly.
you think about it, how many, if any, nutraceuticals on the market is there research on saying, oh, by the way, when you take this, not only is it in helping cognitive function, but it was actually found to help improve IQ. I
Exactly.
mean,
Smart weed,
especially when
right?
you're
It's a
older.
smart
Yes,
weed.
that's what it is. It's a smart weed. And that is pretty cool. I mean, that is unique out there. And if somebody has a, again, I put on my formulator hat and I think, if you are formulating a product and you're formulating a product for cognitive health, for memory, for all of that, and you're thinking, okay, but some of the claims I'm making are the same claims that are made for other things. It's helping cognitive, helping memory. What is my point of differentiation? How can I say something a little bit different? Well, certainly you have the stress angle and the other things you mentioned, but how about IQ? No, no,
Exactly.
nobody has really touched on that, and
Exactly.
and it occurs to me that some people might think, well, how can it help IQ? Well, one way it can help IQ is that if you're improving memory in this way, when you take IQ tests in a very simplified way, it's really looking at what you can recall,
Yeah.
your memory,
Comprehension and
comprehension, and
reasoning.
recall.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And you have
how.
recall, comprehension, reasoning. Well, if you're helping all of those areas, then it does make sense that it could, in fact, help IQ. And who wouldn't like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the same study that I told you about. The one on the stress teachers. So these are the same middle-aged women. They were
Ah, very
teachers. Yeah.
good.
It's the same study.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. So anyway, that's very cool. Um, any other research or any other comments you wanted to make about this particular material?
Yeah, and I think some of the potential of this biocosm is that because it's able to improve BDNF, improve BDNF levels, there is a potential of this in the area of neuroplasticity, and
Sure.
yeah. So because we would want to rewire, like you said, you don't want. How do you teach an old dog new tricks, right? So if you can able to improve BDNF, you'll be able to improve neuroplasticity, and as a result, you're more adaptable, and especially with coming up with new technologies, who wouldn't want to be more adaptable to new technologies, right? To keep ahead, so
Oh
that we
yeah.
don't, so that we don't just give up and stagnate. We can still keep moving if we are able to rewire our brains.
That is something my parents could benefit by. They're pretty sharp, but they're in their 90s, and
Oh wow.
when it comes to anything having to do with like doing something on the computer, they just call me and ask me to take care of it for them, and they're not real comfortable with the technology, and it'd be great if they could become a little bit more comfortable. So maybe I'm going to have to start giving them some biokesum to see if that'll
Yeah,
help
why not? Why not?
help their neuroplasticity so they're more adaptable to technology.
Exactly.
Well, cool. So, Dr. Annie, thank you. This has been really, really interesting. I've learned some new stuff today. And I think this is a fascinating plant, a fascinating herbal medicine with some really important applications for
Yes.
cognitive health as well as for inflammation.
Yes.
And I just want to again thank you for being here, and
Thank you, Gene.
and also just to our listeners to remind you, if you like what you heard today, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Vitamin Professor podcast. All right, Dr. Annie, thanks so much, and
Thank you,
hopefully
Gene.
we'll see you again.
Thank you. See you again. Bye.
Bye-bye.